So please help me and give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to Mr. Rob Frohwein.
Hey there, how are you? Perfect, you did great. So we've got some of my colleagues in the audience. I know my co-founder, Catherine Petrelli, who loves to speak in front of audiences. She came here to heckle me, I think, from the fifth row there. How many people here, hope to start a business one day? Own a business, be an entrepreneur? Fair number of folks here. And for those of you who go through once you graduate and get out in the work world, you probably realize that it would be nice to actually go out and run your own business one day relative to maybe what you're doing. So what I was hoping to do today was take you through a couple of different presentations, really. The first one is sort of our pitch, Kabbage's pitch, and doing that for two reasons. One reason is because it's a great pitch, it's a great company, and I want to explain to you what we're trying to do for small businesses throughout the US, and we're also launched in the UK. The other reason is I think it's important for you to understand how to sort of tell a story about a company, tell a story about a mission, because it's a very important thing to do when you're going out and raising capital. You know the title of this is 0 to 60 million in venture capital. We've raised 56 million, nearly $60 million to date in venture capital, and it was not easy. In fact, it was one of the hardest things. It was the hardest thing that I've ever done. I'm sure the hardest thing that my co-founder Catherine and our other co-founder Mark has ever done in our lives, but also one of the most rewarding experiences, and could not learn more through a single experience than what we've gone through over the last 5 years. The second half of this presentation is going to be about tips. A lot of people hear about Silicon Valley, about Menlo Park. We've lived it and breathed it and gone out there and spent a lot of time with venture capitalists over the last 5 years. And we've got the scars and brain damage to prove it. So I thought we would share some of those experiences with you as we go through here. We've got about a half an hour and then a little bit of Q&A. So I'm going to sort of ebb and flow and try to move with some alacrity as we go through that, and hopefully have enough time for some good questions at the end. So anyway, defining the opportunity in specialty finance. Small businesses in the US are big business. You can see on the statistics here that small businesses account for more than half of all employees in the United States. They also account for nearly 2/3 of all new jobs in the US and account for more than half of the non-farm GDP. They are one of the most important segments of our entire economy. The challenge is that small businesses never have access to working capital. If you're a large business and you've got a nice balance sheet, going out and getting a loan for your business is easy. I mean, it might take a matter of weeks or even a matter of months, but you know that based on certain factors that you're looking at, you'll be able to go get that capital, and you have a lot of alternatives for looking at that. If you're a small business, getting access to capital is almost impossible. And that's simply because it's hard for banks to really understand these small businesses. Let me give you a few stats. 2008 to 2011, the total number of small business loans has decreased by 17% in that time period. And by the way, it really sucked before that as well. It wasn't as though small businesses were getting a lot of capital prior to 2008. Couple things, microloans. So a microloan is defined as putting out less than $100,000 to a small business. That's fallen precipitously every year for the last 5 years. The largest banks, those that have greater than $50 billion in assets, continue to decrease the amount of capital that they're providing to small businesses. The SMBs represent only 1.25% of the total balance sheet of large banks, even though they employ more than half of all employees. That's a very, very significant statistic. Also, just the number of loans going out to these folks has decreased by 2 million each year, every year for the last 3 years. If you look at some of the major brands in this space, American Express with their Open program for small business only represents about 1/3% of their entire portfolio, and it only gets worse from there. Bank of America, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Cap One. These are all large banks that talk about providing capital to small businesses, but never do. They simply never do. So this is what we set out to do. We've got this character, and this is also, once again I said, this is all about also how you present this information. So we present it as a story. And what we told venture capitalists when we went out there is we made it a children's story because we thought it was the most relevant way to convey information to a venture capitalist was through a children's story about all that they could understand at the time. And usually they laughed at it more than you guys did. But so we have Bill, the small business owner. Bill's an online seller. Bill sells on eBay or he sells on Amazon. And he needs cash to grow his business. And what does he use that cash for? Buying inventory, marketing products, upgrading systems, hiring seasonal employees. The challenge is we have this character, Rich, who's a traditional banker. When bankers see small businesses like Rich, they really can't understand them. So the way a traditional bank usually underwrites a small business is they get the personal credit score of the small business owner. They treat it like a consumer loan, as opposed to looking at that business. And so that really frustrates Bill, right? Because Bill has built this awesome business, but banks really won't pay attention to that business that he's built. The challenge is that banks, with all the bricks and the granite in their lobbies, don't have the systems to really effectively underwrite a small business. They expect the small business owner to come in, meet with them. They expect their loan officer to go see the store. And these small businesses tend, a lot of them are run out of garages, or they're run at shows in Piedmont Park or something along those lines. And so they really don't have all of the systems and all the setup that small businesses need to have for a bank like Rich's to really underwrite them. And so that creates a real problem. But it created an opportunity for us. Because the other thing these small businesses do is they leverage technology like nobody ever has in the past. So these small businesses market their products via Groupon. They accept PayPal. They use QuickBooks Online, which is how they keep their books. They fulfill their product via Amazon. They do things that allow them to connect to other businesses via data, via APIs. And so what we realized is there was an opportunity here. So instead of asking Bill to come in and meet with us to get a small business loan, we figured we could handle this through technology and data. So just have Bill literally come to our site and associate every key account that Bill has for his business with his Kabbage profile. And by doing that, we can actually download the information when Bill lands on our site, and we can analyze that data real time and make an underwriting decision on Bill without Bill even ever having to speak with us. And we do that now. We create accounts more than 10,000 times a month right now. So we have more than 160,000 accounts that we've created since we started throughout the United States and throughout the United Kingdom as well. And the way they do that is they connect specific data. So you see those logos that are in color are data sources to which we've connected. So for example, PayPal and eBay have an API set. Everybody familiar with API sets here at Georgia Tech? I'd assume you do, right? Application Programming Interface. It allows them to authorize and authenticate with us so that we can pull down that data. And one of the most important aspects of this is we stay connected to that data. So when Bill comes in and connects us to that data source, we can underwrite his business at that moment, and then we can continue to see how his business operates after the time that he connects that data source to us, which is another important facet of underwriting small businesses. Small businesses have real huge ebbs and flows. And so consequently, a business that's doing great today might frankly not be doing well a month from now. And if we still have cash available to that customer, that puts us at risk. Now a bank, if they've just had somebody like Bill ship them their financials, won't see the ebbs and flows in that business like we can. And we actually pull down a tremendous amount of data every day for all of those 150,000 accounts that I mentioned. And that's a big difference between the way we operate and other businesses operate. And one of our major goals over time is, so if we can see your data, we can underwrite you. So if we see that you're doing $25,000 worth of revenue each month, we understand whether that dropped down to $20,000 the following month, whether it went up to $30,000. And as we add more data sources, we allow our customers to connect more data with us, and that gives them access potentially to more cash. That gives us more visibility into their business. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool with that? If anybody has any questions, by the way, I'd like you to feel free to throw them out. Yep.
How much data do you guys need to make a really informed decision? As far as how far along does a business need to be before you guys feel like you can make an informed decision?
We like seeing businesses that have been in business at least 3 or 6 months, ideally more time than that. The type of data we're looking for is we're looking for the robustness of the business, how much cash is going in and out of the cash register. We're also looking for character of that business. So we actually pull down data from places like Facebook and Twitter, and we look at seller reviews on eBay. We're going to be connecting with Yelp in the future so we can look at reviews. Those things let us know whether things are changing in that business. We can also look at bidding history, for example, on eBay. So bidding history is really interesting. So if you know that a business has operated at this revenue flow, and you know right now they have a certain number of listings on the site, but they had a lot more listings when they first signed up, you know their revenue is going to go down. Conversely, if they have a lot more listings on the site and a lot of active bidding history, you know their revenue is likely going to go up in the future. So that's a good question. So that was the core premise of what we did. And what we're able to do now is a small business can land on our site and literally have cash in their account within 7 minutes. That's our average. A small business loan effectively in 7 minutes, which is faster than any financial institution on the face of the earth could ever do or could even come close to doing. That's for customers, just so I make it clear, this is for customers that have PayPal, because PayPal allows for immediate cash delivery. If you have to deliver via bank, it might take a full day for you to get the cash, but we actually complete the transaction within that same time period. One of the, so I can sort of explain sort of how we set up this product. Cash in fewer than 7 minutes, really fully automated. Our fees range from anywhere from 2% of how much we provide to you to 8% in the first month, or upwards of between 2 and 20%, depending on how long you keep it. Anywhere from a month to 6 months is the way we set that up. The lines are between $500 and $50,000. So the actual product we provide is effectively a line of credit, so you can take cash at that moment. And then you can come back and take cash later. And that's why it's really important for us to stay connected to that data. This is a really important part in terms of the impact that this has well beyond what we're doing. So there's lots of folks who benefit when small businesses grow. And our average small business has grown from the moment they took cash compared to the period prior to when they took money, 78% on average on an annualized basis. That's how the impact that cash has on a small business. But beyond helping us and helping the small business, it also helps lots of other folks in the ecosystem. So if they're selling on eBay, they list more product on eBay. So eBay generates more fees, or PayPal generates more fees. UPS benefits from it because they're shipping more packages, for example. The bubble wrap manufacturer benefits because they're selling more bubble wrap to the folks that are wrapping product. The impact that working capital has on small businesses is tremendous, and that's a big part of what's good about what we do, is making sure we deliver capital to small businesses because of the impact they have on our overall economy. So, give you a little bit of a background on Kabbage. It's interesting, when you start a business, it says November 2008 to February 2009. The reason why that's not a specific date is when you start a business, it's kind of hard to determine the exact date, because all you know is one day you're working on it a little bit more than you worked on it the day before, and it goes from a hobby to an actual company or a job. And so that's why it's sort of that span of time. We've got north of 80 employees. We're actually just a couple blocks from here, between 3rd and 4th on Peachtree, just north of the Fox Theater. 160,000 accounts. We've put out over $140 million right now in capital. Most of that's happened in the last, frankly, in the last year. We've done this through more than 90,000 discrete transactions. And we've received over 250,000 payments over our lifetime right now. We've raised $56 million, got a couple of issued patents, and there's a whole bunch of press folks that have said nice things about us. And if you invest in us and you're an individual, we make a little caricature of you so that you have that in the future. That's Blue Run Ventures, which is Blue Run, Moore, David Dow, and Tom Vest are all Silicon Valley investors. UPS, you guys know, is an investor in us. David Bonderman, who is the founder of TPG, Texas Pacific Group, which is one of the largest leveraged buyout firms in the world, is an investor in us. And a guy named Warren Stevens, who runs a big investment bank and private equity firm called Stevens Inc. out of Little Rock, Arkansas, is an investor. So now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the, anybody have any questions about that part of the presentation about the company? Okay, good. So now what I wanted to do is just give you some tips about raising money in Silicon Valley. And the name of this is Eat the Food at Kleiner Perkins. which will tell you in a second why we call it that. When you go into a venture capital firm, you can often judge how good or not as good the venture capital firm is by the quality of the candy at the reception desk when you walk in. The really, ones that have a lot of money have, really good chocolate, from some other country. And the ones that are not have like gumballs and things like that. But I'll tell you a little bit about Kleiner Perkins in a second. Before you raise the money. So the most important thing that we could have ever done as a company, and we attribute most of our success, frankly, is to actually hiring somebody on the outside to come in and help us prepare the story that we were going to take out on the road. And we had no money at the time, literally scraping together pennies and nickels to try to run the company at that point. But what we really realized was we needed to have an awesome deck, an awesome story to do this. So I'd negotiate, every price off of everything in the office, but the only thing I didn't really negotiate on was hiring an absolute fantastic storyteller who could tell the story and do it visually. And so to just give you an example, I'm going to show you what our deck looked like before we hired Mary Frances. This was our deck that we were trying to raise money on. It's actually pretty laughable. And that's what we tried to go out and initially raise capital with, and then we realized that wasn't going to work. So we moved to something that was much more visually engaging. And the one thing, still a lot of people said no to us, but the one thing they always stopped and said to us after the fact was, that's a really good deck. Could I get the name of the person who helped you with that? So Mary Frances has become almost famous thanks to us taking her deck around Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park. But you want to be able to convey a story to people. People like stories. They like real characters. They like folks like Bill and Rich and understanding the issue. Throwing a bunch of numbers up or a bunch of bullet points is not that interesting. That's not very, very visually appealing, but doing this and telling a story behind it is really what was able to capture people's imagination and get them into the flow of what we were doing. So that's, I think, lesson number one for us. Lesson number two is the dream of the hereafter. So, we had raised a small amount of capital, and one of our co-founders and our partner, Mark Orlin, after we did that, brought us, somebody made fun of me for bringing an empty bottle of champagne to a university, brought us these bottles of champagne after we closed that round. We thought, oh, that's really nice. And he said, well, you have to look at it. It's personalized. And so what he had done was he basically said, after that round, and we were valued pretty low at that point, to be opened by Rob Frohwein, when Kabbage is valued at or more than $50 million. So he gave us a bottle, which was just an awesome thing, which was really just a goal. Can we build enough value in this company so that we could one day open this bottle of champagne? Not only did he do that, but he also gave a bottle. He had a bottle produced for everybody in the company. So everybody had that and could share that experience together and drive towards that goal. The other really funny thing is when we were negotiating a subsequent round of capital, an offer came in for the company to be valued at $35 million. We turned it down. The next offer was for the company to be valued at like $42 million. And we said, Brian, I don't think you understand this, but we can't close a deal for a value less than $50 million. And he said, why? And he said, because we have a bottle of champagne that can't be opened unless it's $50 million. So we closed that deal at $55 million pre-money, and we opened the champagne. And the other cool thing is we had more bottles produced with a different goal on it, which I won't share with you right now, which we hope to open soon. And then he also gave a smaller group of us another bottle with a much higher number. So we got a little bit of work to do on that one as well. But you need to get everybody sort of on board with a goal and a vision in the company. And that's one thing that I think we've been really successful with at Kabbage is rallying around. That's a financial goal, so that's good, but rallying around a lot of goals inside of the company, but also getting the investors rallied around those goals as well. And so that was something we were able to do. That's just one example of it, and there are many other examples of it internally. The grind. And by the way, this is a condensed version, believe it or not, even though as much as I'm talking. It's a condensed version of a variety of slides we have on this, but talking a little bit more about getting on the road and what you do once you're on the road. So this sounds like a very sort of trite concept, right? Never stop trying. But it really is true. If you see The numbers up there, 423237. Those are the number of times that actual investors in our Series A round said no to us before they said yes. In fact, 7 is the number of meetings we had to have with UPS before they finally said yes to making, frankly, a very small investment in the company, but they've been a fantastic partner since. Every single one of our major investors in the company in our Series A round said no to us a bunch of times. But instead of saying, okay, thank you, and leaving, we did 2 things. One thing is we always ask them, well, why not? And sometimes they just gave us a line, but sometimes they gave us a real piece of information, like we're concerned about, the uptake of the product by customers, or we're concerned that you're not going to be able to service the customers, or your pricing is off, or something along those lines. We took down those notes, we went back, we worked on that, and then we went back to them. We literally went back to them and said, remember you told me if we solved this issue, we could come back to you, which they never actually said to us. But of course they're going to say, oh yeah, I remember telling you that, right? Because people don't remember. But you just assume they're not going to remember that. And they go, yeah. We said, and you told us the reason you weren't investing was because of X. Well, guess what? This is what we found out, and that actually worked. That's what it was amazing. That actually worked with these investors. So that's a major reason you do that. The other thing you do when they say no is you say, if you're not interested, can you tell me somebody else that you think might be interested in this story? Again, this sounds all very logical, but almost nobody that goes out looking for money does this. So our lead investor, Blue Run Ventures, we got to because 3 other people chain referred us. So we had one person refer us to another person who referred us to another person who referred us to Blue Run Ventures. So if we had never asked that question along any of those lines, we probably wouldn't be standing here right now because they've been an incredibly supportive investor. We love them, and we don't think we would have been able to get to where we are today without their support. So it's a really, really important concept, and my partner, Mark Gorlin, is the first guy I really have ever met that embodied the spirit that no is the first step to yes. And he really was great at teaching us that. Find a connection. I actually just spoke about this a little bit. In fact, I think I entirely spoke about this a second ago. This is really, again, just reinforcing the point that you really have to look for the connections between people and see who they know. Your network is not going to be big enough, but your network's network is probably going to be a lot better, and certainly their network is going to be much better. You can actually web your way out, if you're patient and diligent enough, to get to any investor literally in the country. And if you bother them enough, they will actually take a meeting with you. In fact, we had one investor here in town who probably said no to us about 11 or 12 times. I mean, to the point where we learned later that he actually put Mark's phone number in his phone as an avoid phone number. And then Mark tracked him down through somebody else's phone. And he eventually said yes. He didn't write a big check, but he said yes. So that was important. Take me to your leader. This is really, really critical. So a lot of people get super excited about going to a venture capital firm and meeting with somebody in that venture capital firm. A lot of the people that you meet with initially are associates. And those associates have absolutely no authority at all. And they will never help you. And they're almost worthless. In fact, the associates tend to be the people who spend the most time trying to convince partners not to do the deal. We had this one guy, you can look him up on LinkedIn, I'm sure, Lenny Grover, very nice guy, worked for a firm up in Boston, and all he spent was a ton of time trying to figure out how we were never going to be able to do anything that we said we were going to be able to do. So they were ready to give us a term sheet, and then Lenny consistently went through this process to push us away. So the net on this is, what you always want to do when you're talking to an investor is speak to the person. This makes a lot of sense, right? Speak to the person who is actually decision-making authority, or, and in those firms, it's usually a group of people who do, but he's got to be, or she's got to be, one of the people sitting around that table. Very, very critical. So always make sure you have somebody with authority in that room. So this is sort of contrary to my point a couple slides ago, which is sometimes they're not just not that into you. When you're going out, we probably met with, Catherine, how many firms did we meet with in our Series A?
40.
Really? I thought more than that. I was going to say like 100. 195 firms. I think that's about right. We had a lot of phone calls too. But one of the things you got to realize is a lot of times people will give you just a little morsel of hope, right? So they'll say something like, well, this might be interesting. Why don't you go give me a little bit of information on this or that? And a lot of times that's a waste of time. You really need to get very good at understanding those firms who are really serious and those who are just leading you on and wasting your time, because a lot will. We used to have this situation that happened a lot where we'd walk out of a firm and we would say, and it would be a bad meeting, be a horrible meeting. We'd say, well, they're never going to invest in us. And Mark, who I've mentioned a couple times already, would say, you never know. His point was, you never know. They may come back and do something. We walked out of one firm out in Silicon Valley. Meeting ended way early. They were obnoxious to us. They didn't pay attention or anything. We walked out, and I said, well, you never know. And he goes, sometimes you do. They were just so rotten to us. Some people just really, had it out, and for whatever reason, I think we were late for that meeting. Might have been one of the reasons, because we were running around. Don't let a pebble in your shoe take you out of the race. So you'll be in a meeting, you'll be pitching them, and somebody will raise what seems like a pretty small issue. They might say, well, how can you be sure that these small businesses are really going to give you access to their data? It seems like a privacy concern. And we'd say, well, people are getting used to it. They're on Facebook, Twitter, and we tell things. And, yeah, well, maybe. It often turned out that a small throwaway comment during that meeting was going to be the reason that they didn't invest in us. And so you had to become highly attuned to listening to everything they said and making sure that you listen for what we call the pebble in the shoe. Because oftentimes that was the reason they wouldn't invest. And so spend an inordinate amount of time addressing what otherwise seemed like a relatively small issue to make sure you got rid of that pebble and that you could go on to more fruitful conversations with them. Don't let the assholes get you down. This is a good one. So a lot of people were horrible to us, during this process at times. Everybody thinks they're an expert in everything. So these are some of the comments that were directly, directed to us specifically. Your management team is weak and you're not smart enough to make this work. That was a verbatim comment. I'm a lawyer by background. Rob's a lawyer. Why is he CEO? That was enjoyable. Catherine came from CompuCredit. We hate people from CompuCredit. There are too many moving parts in this business. You'll never be able to put it together. People who made you think that the very premise upon which you started the company was a mistake. And they were sure that it was a mistake. And so you just have to have that perseverance to get through that and to realize that they are not always the smartest people in the room. They might have great pedigrees. They might have raised lots of money in the past. They may have even run companies in the past. But they don't know your business as well as you do. And you need to have faith that you know this business and you can drive through it. And that's very, very important. The final one, so there been any manager, this is a really funny one. The same firm that was up in Boston I made reference to before really disliked one of the members of our management team and was sure the business would never succeed. And then after a couple financial raises later, and we had gotten a lot of great press, and we were obviously doing pretty well, we made an announcement that we raised $17 million or whatever the number was. I get a phone call from this guy, this partner in the firm who turned us down, principally based on this guy, on one of my partners that he didn't like. He goes, so I see you've done that. He goes, do you still have the same management team you had when you were in here? Assuming that, how could we ever be successful with the management team we had before? And I was really excited to say, yep, exact same team. So sometimes those phone calls are a lot of fun and feel good. This is one that can piss off the venture community in Atlanta, but every venture firm in Atlanta passed on our deal. Chances are they'll pass on yours too. So we say make Delta your silent partner and make sure you get up and out of Atlanta to at least look for money. By the way, that doesn't mean Atlanta venture firms aren't good. They are. The challenge is there's so few of them. So you gotta always give yourself the best opportunity to raise money. And that means getting on a plane, going out to California, going to Boston, going to New York, and meeting with lots of different investors. You've got to create an environment where you can raise money, and you've got to talk to folks that have a lot of cash available, because a lot of people will say no. I have everybody that, out of the 95 firms that said no to us, we only needed one that said yes before we were able to get our first Series A deal done. By the way, a lot of people think that, going out Silicon Valley and raising money is really glamorous. Well, it's a lot of middle seats, way back in coach, horrible situations. This is a picture of myself, Catherine, and Mark on a flight coming back from Boston while a baby was being changed literally in the row behind us. So that's the glamorous experience. I think that was in the midst of our Series A raise or Series B raise. So it's definitely not a glamorous pursuit. So a few other tips, and how am I doing on time? Good?
You're wrapping up in 5 minutes.
All right, I'm wrapping up in less than 5. Good. All right, a few more points here. Anticipate the objections, $100 challenge. We now go into venture firms whenever we talk to investors now, and we literally offer them $100 if any of them ask us a question that we've never been asked before. I'm not going to put that out to this crowd, because that would probably bankrupt the company. So don't burn important investors for your first pitches. So quick aside, when I was in college, one of my summer jobs was I used to draw blood at a hospital. And the way they taught me how to draw blood in a hospital was they had me stick comatose patients, because they wouldn't know what I missed. Sounds terrible, it was true. Was that bad? Was that a bad example, guys? Several folks from the company. Same idea on your pitches. Don't burn your first pitches on the best potential investors. Go out there and try it as often as you possibly can. Pitch 10 times a day if you can, just to get better at doing it, because it really is more of an art, and you've really got to get that down, or a little bit more of a science. You really got to get that down. Quick thing, don't ever use the word conservative. Everybody puts these financial models together and they look like they're going to make $500 million in the next 2 years. And you go, well, that's conservative. We're probably going to do much better than that. Use different words. People hate the word conservative, just attainable or something a little bit more reasonable. I talked a little bit about don't be afraid of VCs, their pedigrees. Don't make them smarter than you. It's very true. I mean, if you show confidence in your business, confidence in yourself, confidence in your model, they're going to be confident. And that's a really important thing to understand. Don't let them unnerve you as you go through that process. When you go to conferences, talk to speakers before they speak. I talked to a couple people beforehand, before it showed up a little bit early. One of our biggest areas of success for partnerships or for investors, everybody crowds the speaker, probably with the exception of today, everybody crowds the speaker after the talk is over. Nobody talks to the speaker before the speaker is up and talking. So that's the ideal time to go up and engage in a conversation. So do that. That's the way we actually first met. Does anybody here know a guy named Ron Conway? Ever heard of an investor called Ron Conway? Few people. Probably the most famous investor in Silicon Valley. The reason he invested in Kabbage, we went to him before he spoke, and he goes, yeah, I'm going to get together with you after. We would never have had that opportunity with him had we waited till after he had spoken. Get a room, a data room. This is really simple. There's lots of services out there. So if you're raising money and you have all these documents, we always encourage, we've always tried to maintain a centralized online place for folks to come and look at our documents and review our documents for a deal. And we continue to maintain that today because we're always dealing in sort of advanced equity and debt discussions. And so that really helps. Ask your vendors for money, really important one. One of the key components of our system, a couple of the key components of our system are two pieces called a system of record and a decisioning engine. We didn't have any money. Those are really expensive, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars. We talked them into actually licensing that to us for equity in the company. So those were dollars that we didn't have to raise right off the bat, and that really helped the company propel at a very early stage and get a lot done very early in our life. Get a good lawyer. A lot of people like to do everything on the cheap. Just like you have a good presentation, make sure that you get good help along the way to make sure you're not making mistakes. And that's something that we always made sure we did. Ask for the money. This is really important. A lot of people go out there and they go, oh, I'm really looking for a mentor, and if you could help me, learn how to do this business, and I really don't want you to invest in us. If you want them to invest, ask them to invest. Say, please put money in my company. I want you to be an investor in this, and that's really important. A lot of people are afraid to do that. And then the final tip here is get your first check in the door, which means that, hey, once you get the first dollar in the door, the money will start flowing. So I'm going to move. How many minutes do we have? I got to get done. Okay, good. So a couple quick things I'm going to throw out. Again, it's good to get competition in any deal. So get more than one suitor for your deal. Raise money when you don't need it. I'm not suggesting a threesome here. God, that was terrible. I shouldn't say that here. The idea is you want to get more than one potential suitor in your transaction. All right. So we were fortunate to have two term sheets, and then a final term sheet came in for our Series A, and that really helped us negotiate the overall deal because people wanted that deal. The other thing is move quickly. Once somebody signs a deal, once you agree to get an investment in that company, get it done. It took us only 16 days from our first term sheet to actually getting it closed, and anything can happen. I mean, God forbid, planes can hit buildings. The financial system could crash. Any sort of thing can happen to upend, and a lot of deals have been lost just because it took a few extra days to get a deal done. There's this line from the movie Wall Street from the 80s that says, "Money doesn't sleep," and that's very true. You need to get these deals done quickly. Finally, eat the food at Kleiner Perkins. Tell this story real quick. So Catherine, Mark, and I were on a marathon session out on Sand Hill Road in Menlo Park. And we had 7 meetings in like an 8.5-hour span. So literally you go and you pitch for 45 minutes or an hour, and these venture firms are all set up in the same condensed area. So it only takes you 3 minutes to get to the next one. So we would leave 15 minutes in between meetings. We're starving. We didn't eat breakfast. It's probably 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We walk into Kleiner Perkins, literally ready to pass out, and we see this huge buffet of food out. So they serve this unbelievable lunch to all their folks every single day. And we're like, should we grab something? Should we just you're literally walking by wondering if you grab a cookie or a piece of fruit or a sandwich off the tray, and we're like, no, we're going to be good. We want them to invest in us. We go into the meeting. We have the meeting with this venture capitalist. It's pretty evident to us that they're not going to invest. And we're walking out, and we're walking by this table filled with food, and we look at each other, and we decided not to grab anything, right? Because we thought it would look bad. We left, and sure enough, like a day or two later, they said they weren't going to invest. So the lesson in that was eat the food at Kleiner Perkins, because they probably won't invest in you. And that was the final story. I think that's it. So that's all for this talk. Happy to answer any questions if you have any questions related to anything about the company or raising money or starting a business. Yep.
I mean, I can talk out loud.
Yeah, talk loud. Good.
2 questions for you about Kabbage. One, for utility patents, it's getting a lot more expensive to file with the USPTO, especially if you want to do international.
Yep.
Is that something y'all with Kabbage are exploring or currently doing? You said you have 2 that you're helping do, or do you want to see them already established?
Do we want to see them already established? So the answer to your question is we have filed for patent protection. We did it from the earliest of times. I have a long background. The 3 books I wrote were on intellectual property. So it was definitely something that was important to me and important to my colleagues when we started the business. I'd say it's actually been a very critical thing that we did. In fact, there's been a couple of companies that have come in and tried to proactively attack our patents simply because they want to move into the market. So having those in place right now is that it's costing us a lot of money, but now we have money to actually defend ourselves and to pursue more patent protection. I think it's a good idea. Now, there's a lot of BS patents out there, right? So you can file a patent on anything you want and not get it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend just filing for the sake of filing, but if you have something that you think is worth protecting, absolutely protect it. Absolutely. And by the way, I have a great recommendation for a guy that helped us out when we were pretty early on, who did a great job at a really inexpensive rate relative to other folks out there. So I'm happy to share that contact with you as well.
The other question is, I'm sure you're familiar with the biotech thesis has really kind of gotten quiet in a few years. Is Kabbage looking to move into the next tier of maybe doing 510K or PMA approvals for businesses?
No, we're not. We haven't looked into that. So we haven't. But good idea. We probably should.
But it's super costly.
Yeah. Yes.
Robert, I'm Christian DeCenzo, mechanical engineering. I don't really belong here, but I'm interested. So I was interested in when you get those small little questions that eat away at your presentation, what was some of the specific tactics you used to shut them down?
Well, there's one. I'll tell you one story. We were up at this firm in New York. It wasn't actually all that long ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And it's interesting, the perspective that, we're in a venture capital firm. Frankly, most of the people in that firm have a lot of money. Even the associates have a lot of money. And we had one of these annoying associates in the meeting with us. And, we'd already done, $50 million in loans and advances. And he said to us, he goes, well, what's the average amount you put out? Well, we put out like $2,000 or $3,000 at a time. It's about the amount of cash we put out each time. And he goes, I don't really understand that. Who doesn't have like $3,000 in their bank account? Why do they need a loan? And what was amazing was, so my response to him was, that point's already been proven. We already have people actively taking the money. We have more business than we know what we can do with. So I think, making sure that you respond in a sort of concrete way, not that makes them look stupid, although that tended to have that effect at that time. But make sure you understand your market and you have more confidence and more information. More information wins. And so, in that situation, if you have a couple things. One is, in that situation, we needed to be able to say, look, we already have done this business. We're not going to start back. This is not 2008 when we're going out initially pitching it. We've already proved the business. The other thing is practice. I mean, you need to anticipate every single question. There's literally not a question about our business that could be asked that we haven't heard 50 times. And that's how you really address those things, is just be ready with an answer that makes sense. So.
Eric Crane, first year MBA student. I was just curious, what was the genesis of the idea? So how did you come up with it? And then how did you go about selecting your early team members?
That's a good question. So I came up with the idea in 2007. Two different things. One was, I've always been a big idea guy. And so I have, I've always tried to solve problems, start businesses, and do those types of things. And I actually don't believe that great ideas come, at least not to me, in the middle of the night or while I'm in the shower. Great ideas come when I actively think of a problem. And so and I also have techniques for thinking about or coming up with ideas, as crazy as that may sound. One of the techniques is you say, what if one company bought another company? What would they do with it? And so I literally thought to myself, what if eBay bought a credit company? What would they do with it? And the natural output of that was, well, they'd fund the businesses that generate them all their revenue, which are the small businesses on their site. Now, attended to that was the fact that I was already an investor and involved with a company that was pulling down data from online marketplaces to identify counterfeit and fraudulent products being sold online. So is that Tiffany lamp really a Tiffany lamp? And so I knew that there was product and seller level data that you could pull down from different sites for use in trying to identify that kind of activity. And I thought that kind of data would be good for trying to figure out whether a small business is creditworthy or not creditworthy. So I sort of combined those two concepts. So the other, how did I go about selecting the other folks? And selecting is kind of a funny word, right? Catherine left for that part. Because I now think I understand that. Back then it was just luck. I had worked with Catherine in a different context before. She was working at a company called CompuCredit, a credit company here in town. And she struck me as the kind of person that understood credits and payments, but it could also talk about it, right? She could get out there and get a lot of energy and really understood the market. And really conveyed a lot of passion and confidence in others about the topic. She also seemed like she'd be a fun person to work with. And you want to work with people that you like. Mark Orland was a guy who I had known for a number of years. He was involved in other startups here in the community. And I had gotten to know him on a personal level and knew he was a good person. He was also somebody who was funny and I enjoyed working around. He also had a network that was absurd in terms of at least those initial connections to folks that could help us raise money. I think now looking back on it, you want to have folks that have the subject matter expertise, that have some capital raising capabilities. And so I don't really know what I brought to the table personally, because those guys covered most of it. I think I knew both of them, and I think that was a big part of it.
Just one follow-up question. How did you convince them?
Well, it wasn't with lots of money or anything, because we didn't have any back then. It's interesting. Catherine was at a juncture. They were both at junctures in their careers where they were sort of not, really connected with something at that point or just rolling off something. It was very much a right point, the right time to address that with them. So I did frankly get a little lucky in that respect. But the other thing is I think we saw that there was a real opportunity. And we'd all, sort of been in various related spaces in the past and saw that this could be big. I mean, we're talking really large opportunity. I think we wanted to do it. And it was a crazy time to do it. We were right in the midst of the global financial crisis. This is late 2008. Everything was falling down, and we're going to start a financial services company in Atlanta. It was, absolutely the craziest. But the best thing I can tell you is that it's great to have an anti-herd mentality. So when everybody's running away from something, it's a perfect time to run at it. And right now, it's one of the hottest spaces out there. That's only because we took advantage of a time frame where nobody would touch it. Everything ebbs and flows.
Two questions. First, sorry.
There you are.
First question, how did you guys come up with the name Kabbage? And second question, have you had any issues with these small businesses defaulting on their loans, and have you dealt with that?
Could you compare the default rate relative to like a big bank, like their default rates?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that. I'll do the first. Kabbage is a colloquialism for cash. I don't know how many people knew that people call cabbage cash. That actually is slang from the early 1900s for cash, and it's really prevalent in Eastern Europe. We came up with that because we spent literally weeks at a bar checking out every possible domain name that had any bread tap, Vine, cash. I mean, we had some horrible names. We just actually sort of forwarded around to the whole company the list of names that we had. We happened on a Kabbage. We chose K because Kabbage with a C was available for $75,000, and Kabbage with a K was available for $1,200. So we chose. Now when we see Kabbage with a C, we think it's misspelled. Now default rates. So our default rates are, when you start a business leveraging data that nobody's ever looked at for this, the first thing that you really need to do is you need to go out and you sort of have to run naked for a while, which means that you got to take all comers and you got to let, and guess what? You're going to lose money. You're going to spend maybe millions of dollars losing money. But one thing that we always made sure we did is we brought all these folks in, we had them connect an unbelievable number of data sources and and pulled in many attributes related to each of those data sources. And now we have an unbelievably robust set of data, and we can basically figure out precisely who we want to target based on lots of attributes. So the answer to the question what our default rate is historically it's been above what some of the larger banks are. Now we're able to move it below what they are, simply because we have this unbelievable amount of data, and we're able to underwrite customers and understand if somebody comes in from this origination source and they add these data sources and they've been around for this long and they have this much revenue and they have this kind of feedback rating and it's changed this much over this period of time, they're going to default on average at 3.2%. Or something along those lines, right? So now we have all that data, and we can accurately project exactly what our default rate is going to be for any segment of audience that we bring in. So that's the power of what we brought in, and we have a lot of big banks talking with us right now because they want to leverage the same kind of power that we've built, and that's part of the strategy going forward.
Have you developed specific algorithms or scoring methods like
No, we have our own scores for different tiers. We have different inputs for different tiers. I mean, it's sliced up as many different ways as you can possibly imagine. What's that?
Is that trade secret on the school?
Yes, absolutely. I can hear you.
Have you seen any interesting trends, like growth or declines of niche markets with the small businesses that you support?
So the question was, have we seen any growth or declines or any niches within the various markets we serve? Yeah, we've seen a million of them. I mean, it's interesting in certain markets seeing how sort of the gift card market works and how we see that sort of ebb and flow. That's actually one of our frankly higher bad debt markets. There's again, we divide up sort of, if you're a merchant, we divide that up into probably 40 different product categories, and we see how those businesses sort of ebb and flow within those markets. So one of the interesting things we've looked at is, how can we build indexes for small businesses and publish them out to the Wall Street Journal or other business publications, based on, we're getting a huge amount of data. We've published a bunch of surveys as well in terms of holiday shopping and other things that we've seen. So, the power of this data goes well beyond just underwriting for credit extension.
You mentioned that y'all track and continue to assist the clients. Do y'all have plans for providing them with substantially larger amounts of capital as they too grow?
Yeah, so we again, right now we go up on an automated basis to $50,000. We've actually gone north of that. We've gone north of 100,000 with some of our customers. So we've absolutely seen the opportunity to grow with the businesses. I mean, we're still fairly young. Right, so we really just started putting capital out at volume a couple of years ago. What's been fascinating is the fact that the customers that we originated back, a couple of years ago are actually taking more cash today than they were taking 2 years ago. So the nice thing about the model we've created is, we can stay connected to these businesses and continue to help them grow. Other competitors, sort of in our space, are they usually push out one lump sum of money to the customer at one time in its life. They may give them $50,000 right off the bat. The fact that we give them a line for $50,000 means that over a 2 or 3 year period, they've probably taken $200,000 or $300,000 from us. And so that's one of the things that that sometimes is hard to convey, is that actually we're giving a lot more money. It's sort of like your credit card, where you can pay off the line every month and then you get access to more capital. So same kind of idea.
So no is the first step to yes, right? And how do you differentiate when you have an experience where you're getting so many no's, yet you still have this idea in your mind that you shouldn't give up, versus give up and look elsewhere, you're investing your energy in the wrong spot, you're barking up the wrong tree? And how do you get better at differentiating those two situations?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good question. I mean, there's certainly situations, there's the risk in any business that you start that you get just this sort of small amount of positive feedback, and that keeps you going a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer, and before you know it, you're 3 years into it and in reality, you've made no progress. I mean, so I think one thing you need to do is you need to set up definite, go, no-go parameters. Like if I'm not able to accomplish X by such a date, I'm going to have to do something else. It can be sort of be a catalyst to actually achieving. So that's an important part. The other thing is you just have to probe with these folks. You got to understand, the reason they're saying no, and you also have to judge whether they're being honest with you. Right? Because some people will say no and they'll give you a reason. The reality is they just have absolutely no interest. So you have to develop enough of a rapport with that individual in a relatively short period of time so that you can get down to the truth. And you need to let them know that that's what you're looking for. People actually want to give you advice. They don't want to lie to you. They don't want to give you, a song and dance about something, and they don't want you wasting their time. So the key thing is you actually have to say that to them. Say, look, I know you're busy. I know I don't want to waste your time. You don't want to waste mine. But can you give me some honest advice as to where you see the challenges here, and be as blunt as you possibly can. You have very little to lose and actually a lot of respect to gain from that person if you're just honest with them and direct with them. So that's my best recommendation.
I'm wondering if you have any plans to supply Chinese small and medium businesses with loans.
Say that one more time.
Do you have plans to supply Chinese small and medium businesses with loans, being that most of the Chinese banks are large and government-run and really don't have a means of evaluating Chinese SMBs?
Good question. Foreign markets. We're in the UK. We have a pilot that will probably launch sometime next year with a bank out of Asia that's going to be in the Hong Kong and Korea markets. China is a different story. Alibaba, is anybody here familiar with Alibaba and the Alibaba Group? Okay, so they operate Alibaba, which is a large site for supplying products to merchants, both domestically in China as well as internationally. They operate something called Taobao, which is sort of like the eBay in China. They actually run a Kabbage clone in China right now, and so they fund, very similarly to Kabbage, they fund merchants in China. So it makes it unlikely that we're going to move into that market immediately. We do have conversations with those guys all the time because there's opportunities outside of China related to how could potentially, because a lot of U.S. merchants buy from Chinese merchants, selling on Alibaba. So there's an opportunity to actually help Chinese suppliers supply product outside the U.S. and that's something that we're looking at. So.
Many of the sellers on these sites are hybrids. They have bricks and mortar as well as what they sell online. Do you take into account what's going on in those other, in the non-online parts of the business in your decisions?
So, fantastic question. I guess that's why you are who you are. Everyone's gone. So that was one of our big challenges, right? Was we were only looking at a lot of online activity. And so one of the big pushes for us has been to be able to look at activity that's happening offline, in bricks and mortar as well. And we're doing that through relationships right now with UPS, through QuickBooks, and we're soon going to be releasing a product that's going to primarily be looking at the checking accounts of small businesses that allows us to understand sort of the financial makeup of those businesses regardless of where they operate. So the sort of long answer to your question is, yes, we're taking it into account in certain instances right now, and we'll continue to take it into account more over the next year. And it's a big market expansion opportunity for us.
Does that mean that you might expand into an area beyond just sales, in other words, to start funding manufacturers?
So,
because you could,
yeah.
the accounts payables to those guys is absolutely huge. The big companies are all going, 120 days, they're not paying the small businesses. If they could get that money right away, they can scale up and be the biggest job creation program in the country.
That sounds perfect. No, absolutely. So yes, we're already working with some manufacturers, working with distributors. We're also working with service companies now, so getting outside the merchant trade, so looking at folks that are providing all sorts of services out there. We believe there's opportunities in each of those verticals, and without a doubt, we're turning aggressively. And you're right, trade credit has been eaten up. So one of the best places for small businesses to get credit is frankly from the people who supply them with their product, right? And so that means getting better terms on your inventory. So instead of paying 30 days, you're allowed to pay them in 60 days or 90 days. Most suppliers of product have really cut that way down and cut it down to 15 days. And that puts a huge crunch on the small businesses. So helping to open up that channel is absolutely huge, and it's something that we definitely have looked at. So.
Yeah, hi Rob, it's Matthew Madsen, MBA student. How did Kabbage get the confidence when they went and had the discussions and talked to people about Kabbage? Realize you have 2 utility patents, and VCs have a common, faith of not needing a non-disclosure. But in talking to eBay on trying to get data from them without them going off and doing it on their own, what gave you guys the confidence to get the word out?
So a really good question and a good one to wrap up on. My background is in intellectual property, and you've got to be very careful not to be paranoid when you're an entrepreneur. And you've got to take, I mean, it's not about risk, it's about calculated risk. And we knew that eBay was fundamental to us being able to launch this business. So what else were we able to do? You've got to realize not everybody's trying to steal your idea. A lot of the things I talked about right now, about talking about what, Alibaba, or talking about, what we're doing with checking accounts, any of you heard that? To replicate our system is not easy. But we have the confidence to go out there and be able to execute on these markets. I've always said that people can see where we've been and they can see where we are, but it's really hard for them to truly see where we're going. And we can say that we're doing something, but it's like handing somebody a pile of code. It's really hard to figure out what that code does. In reality, you need the people who are involved in executing on that. And so I firmly believe when you go into these partnership discussions, you've got to be willing to, talk to them. And guess what? A lot of them are not going to execute an NDA with you. And if you say, well, then I'm not talking with you, and then they're going to say, well, I don't care if you don't talk to me. Get out of my office. They're literally going to say that. So you just have to have the confidence to go in there, and believe that you're going to be able to get the money, be able to put together the team, build the systems and operations, and execute better than anybody else. A big company is the least equipped to go out and build a new business. I think everybody in this room is much better equipped to build a new business than those guys are. So you just have to have confidence in yourselves to go do that.
Well, thanks for coming to Georgia
Thank you.
Tech today.